Hello, everyone. We're just going to get started as people are joining in. So we're very excited about this evening's program. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. On behalf of Cornell University's Northeast Corridor Office for Alumni Affairs and Development, I would like to welcome you to our webinar on family mental health and wellness in uncertain times. My name is Marique Bradford Toothaker, and I graduated from the College of Human Ecology in 1997. I'm very lucky to work as a development officer for Cornell. I work with Cornell's Northeast Corridor team and am based in Connecticut. So I got used to working from home a long time before it was forced on the rest of you. The best part about my job is that over my many years of working for Cornell, I've had the great fortune to meet many fabulous Cornellians, just like this evening's speaker, as well as many of you who are attending this evening's program. Hello to all of you out there whom I know very well, and welcome to those of you I have not yet met. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm thrilled to have been asked to introduce our featured speaker this evening, Susan Krause. Susan is a human ecology graduate from the class of 1994, a licensed master social worker, and founder and executive director at Boost Child and Family Services in Westport, Connecticut. Tonight, Susan will provide us with tips to help optimize our potential to learn and thrive with each other in this time of uncertainty. Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing your gifts and expertise with the fabulous group of Cornellians who have gathered here tonight. We had over 200 people register for tonight's program, and we're so excited to welcome many of them this evening. I know that you, Susan, like many of us, are juggling a new way to work, the demands of your children who are working through online school and all the fun that comes along with that, and all of the same fears and concerns that are shared among us in these strange and challenging times. We are very grateful to be able to hear from you tonight. A brief background on Susan. Susan Krause is a psychotherapist licensed in both Connecticut and New York who has worked with children, adults, and families for over 20 years. As I mentioned earlier, she graduated from HUMEC in 1994, where she was an HDFS major, Human Development and Family Studies. Susan later earned a master's degree in social work from NYU. Susan counsels children from elementary age through college. She practices multiple therapeutic modalities, including cognitive behavioral therapy and attachment-focused family therapy. Susan has vast experience counseling children struggling with depression and anxiety, trauma, oppositional defiant disorder, ADHD, and other psychological issues. She focuses specifically on work with the family unit and integrates parenting and family counseling into her practice. She has developed and facilitated many types of therapeutic groups for children with various needs. Before launching Boost in 2012, Susan worked in a variety of settings from special needs schools to hospitals to international clinics. She worked within an expat community when living in Beijing, China from 2009 through 2012. Susan recently launched an extension of her business called Boost University, which offers virtual counseling services to college and university students across the United States. Susan lives in Weston, Connecticut with her husband, 2 sons, and 2 dogs. And now I will turn the webinar over to Susan for the next 40 minutes or so. At 7:45, Susan will shift from her prepared remarks to answering your questions. If you have any questions throughout the program, please type them into the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can do this at any time during the presentation and your questions will be read at the appropriate time. We will get to as many questions as possible and the webinar will end right at 8 o'clock. Thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight, and thank you again for being with us, Susan. We're looking forward to your remarks.
Hi, everybody. Hoping you can all hear me and see me as I work through this technology here. Marique, thank you so much for that introduction. I have to say, getting to know Marique over the past couple of years has been a real joy as I've kind of reconnected with the Cornell community. So thank you so much, first of all, for asking me to speak tonight. I am really honored to be here with all of you, albeit in our sort of new virtual space that we're finding ourselves in more and more often. But I can feel the Cornell spirit coming through. So I'm really pleased to be here. And again, really grateful that you're all joining me. I want to start tonight by just saying that, you know, Cornell has a very, very special place in my heart. And I am so grateful for all the time that I spent there and the great learning that I did in the School of Human Ecology. And it was just an amazing way for me to start my career in the mental health field. And I will be forever grateful for that time and that education. The other way I want to sort of preface what we're going to talk about tonight is to say that we are all in very much uncharted territory. We are in a new time right now, a very unexpected time that none of us could really have planned for. And therefore, sort of all of the things that we've known as far as helping our families and helping our kids has shifted and changed. So I do not have all the answers of how we can get through this together, how we can get through this with our families. But what I do hope I can do tonight is impart a little bit of wisdom to all of you based on the work that I have done over the past 15, 20 years, mostly around anxiety, grief, loss, and trauma. And while this is a very unique experience, as I said, there are a lot of things that we have learned over the years about dealing with grief and dealing with trauma and dealing with loss that are very relevant here today. So my goal would be to kind of go through a lot of that in some broad strokes. It's obviously a very, very broad field, so I can't get into details, but to give you some general information, general knowledge, and then you kind of take what I've given you tonight and apply it to your own life and your own situation. With that being said, I know that we're in a collective trauma space right now in a lot of ways. You know, I don't think it's far-fetched to consider this novel coronavirus as a trauma that we're all dealing with collectively. But I want you also to be very mindful of your own situation and your own family situation and take that into account with what I'm talking about tonight. And it's particularly important to sort of do a risk assessment of your own family and yourself and see how you feel you're able or are reacting to what's going on. So if you're in a higher risk group, I want you to be very attentive to that and very mindful of that. And who's a higher risk group? So anybody who kind of came to this situation with any pre-existing mental health issues, whether it's anxiety, depression, any learning disabilities, any processing issues that you may see in your children, anybody who had sort of some pre-existing conditions may be at greater risk for having a very adverse reaction to what's going on. And I think we're all having adverse reactions, which we'll talk about today. We'll talk about sort of the general public and what a lot of us are going through. But I just don't want you to lose sight of the fact that there are quite a lot of families who come into this situation with their own issues around loss and grief, and again, some pre-existing mental health issues, and we want to pay particular attention to those people. And so please make sure that if you fall into one of those categories, that you do seek out some professional help if you feel it's needed. You know, we're seeing a great influx of, I know I am, people coming in for help. And I think one of the silver linings is that we're delivering a lot of work virtually, and it's working really nicely, particularly for older kids and adults. So just feel like I want to preface with that. So we move on. I decided to start this presentation with this quote from Viktor Frankl, who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning. And actually that book has been on my to-read list for many years, and I finally have been digging into it, and I highly recommend it. It's certainly very relevant right now. So this quote, just for me, sort of sums up what I'm hoping today will be a bit about. And it will give us sort of a framework to look at what we're going to be talking about and learning. So to quote him, Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I love this quote because I think it summarizes, again, some of the work that we're going to talk about and how we can find some control in a time that feels so out of control. We can find some control in our response, how we manage what we're being asked to deal with, and how we can potentially even grow from it. I think that's very poignant. And for those of you who don't know about Viktor Frankl, he's a very well-known Austrian neurologist and Holocaust survivor. And he made the decision when he was in the concentration camp to, if he came out and survived, to dedicate his life to helping others learn about resilience and learn about overcoming grief and loss. And he has devoted his life and written many books. Man's Search for Meaning is one of them. So I feel like it's especially poignant to think about this quote during a time, again, where we're all collectively dealing with trauma and loss on various levels and in our own particular way. And to say, well, where can we gain some control? Where can, as we're feeling like things are spinning out of control for us, where can we take back a little control? Well, we can in our response and how we manage the things on a day-to-day basis that are affecting us and our families. And sometimes it's very simple, the ways we'll do that, and I'll speak to that. So I think this could be the potential gift for all of us in this really heartbreaking situation, an ongoing heartbreaking situation we're finding ourselves in. Just one other quick quote from Viktor Frankl. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And I think that's really poignant as well. So again, we are going to look at everything that we're talking about tonight, through a spectrum of loss that I think is very common. That's the common thread running right now, is that there's a tremendous amount of loss, and loss is on a continuum. It's everywhere from potentially having lost a family member or a friend to this disease, maybe losing your health by being sick from it and battling with that, loss of celebrations, graduations, weddings that were canceled, loss of sports seasons, school. Losses, again, are on a continuum, and they're all meaningful loss. And we want to honor all of those losses that we're all collectively going through. We don't want to lose sight of them. But I think, and I really believe, and I say this to my clients, we can honor our losses, but also try to gain back some ability to grow and prosper and thrive in any ways we can during this time. So I think to kind of really hone in on what I'm speaking about with loss, I want to share some real live quotes from clients of mine. I got their permission, and no names, of course. But I'd like to share a few quotes with you, and I'll just read them really quickly, and you can process them. See if you can connect maybe to any of what you're hearing. And then I'll speak a bit more about loss, and then what our kind of collective response to loss has been, and what I'm hearing from a lot of people of how they are feeling emotionally. And we'll dive into that after. So the first quote is from a current 9th grade student I work with. I'm having a hard time because we are always with family. There is no real break. The things that annoy me about them become even more annoying. Annoying is a very popular word for middle school and high school kids. There is more fighting in my house because we take all our feelings out on each other. Now, a grandparent's experience. I miss my grandkids. I feel like time has been taken from me and I will never get it back. And this is a real concern for our aging population, who are, at increased risk, but also the impact of separation on them is tremendous. It's very hard to be stuck at home all day, every day, and not be able to see my friends. Online school is so annoying, there's that word again, and makes everything about this even harder. So that's a 6th grader. This is from a hospital worker that I speak with frequently. I want to help others, and I'm used to doing so, but not at this level and intensity. I know I need to take care of myself, but there is no time. This is a working mom at home. Working from home is a challenge every day. I try to set a schedule for my day, and then inevitably it goes awry. I feel like I'm failing at work and homeschooling. I don't usually feel parent guilt, but during this time I feel it a lot. And that's something I'm hearing over and over from parents, this guilt that they're supposed to be, sort of doing more than they are and be teachers and parents. It's very challenging. And finally, this quote, which is a pretty intense quote from a college freshman. I know college kids are struggling mightily right now, and I think this kind of sums it up nicely. Being at home is a sad time for college kids everywhere. I wonder if all my hard work, tears, battles, bruises, etc. will all be for nothing. It scares me to think we'll never be able to gather like we used to. Campus will feel different no matter how or when we start going back. Actually, everything will be different. All my life, I've looked forward to the quintessential college experience, the best 4 years of your life. But will I have that? It is a scary unknown, and my college career was only just beginning. I can't help but think it could all be over. And on top of that, I want my stuff back. Sort of love that piece of it because it really speaks again to the intensity of her experience and all of the really poignant things she talks about at the beginning. And then, but also I had to leave all my stuff because I had to run out of there so quickly. And that's what most college students had to do. So just to talk a little bit more about loss. And, you know, again, I've done a lot of work over the years around loss and grief and trauma. So I just kind of want to break down loss into 4 categories, and just so you understand that loss is a real thing and it's impactful and deep and intense. And we all come to this situation with our own collective losses that we've had before. We, you know, as adults, most of us have gone through grief and trauma or loss before. So we may bring that to the table, but we've also probably learned some ways to deal with loss and grief. For many of our kids, they really haven't experienced, hopefully, much loss or grief. So this may be their first experience with it. So it's novel for them. And that sort of brings its own host of things we need to sort through. So if I can just quickly talk about loss, there's really sort of 4 categories of grief or loss that we read about and talk about and then help folks with. Ambiguous, and they come into play very much in this time. So there's ambiguous loss, and it's what it sounds like. It's loss that is not clear. We're not actually sure what our loss is, but we know we've lost something, and I think that's really powerful right now. I know a lot of people are saying to me, I just feel like you've lost so much, and I don't even know exactly what it is. I mean, I can pinpoint certain things, but it just feels like a loss of faith or a loss of normalcy, and it's hard to pinpoint. So it's kind of, it's blurry a little bit. There's anticipatory loss, which is loss about something that's going to happen in the future. And I think this is a huge thing that we're all struggling with right now because of the unknowns and the fact that no one has answers, and we're sort of looking to people for answers and no one has them. And we're anticipating, my God, like what's going to happen next? Will I go back to school? Will I go back to work? Will I go to a restaurant? So that's a really big type of loss we're dealing with. Secondary loss, and it's sort of illustrated really beautifully with this college freshman quote, because it's a loss that comes, it's not the main loss, but it comes as a result of your primary loss. So in this case, her primary loss was having to leave school. But her secondary loss was, I had to leave all my stuff there. I've got none of my things. And while that may seem to some, you know, not such a big deal, if you can put yourself in the shoes of a college freshman, all her belongings are there and her summer clothes and all of that. So it's a big deal. And then complicated loss, which is also something I want people to be really mindful of, which is if you've experienced another loss, perhaps during this time. I happen to know a lot of people who have lost family members, not to COVID, but to other issues. And so they're grieving that loss. And then in this whole environment of loss, or perhaps people who've lost something or someone a long time ago and are stuck and they really haven't moved past that loss. Maybe it's bringing that back up, or a trauma or grief that they've had in the past. I know people I've spoken to who have a history of trauma are really struggling right now. And those, you know, that's a category where I feel like if you can get some mental health support, it's really, really important. So we want to, again, honor the spectrum of loss. Don't minimize anyone's loss. Don't minimize your kids' losses. So if they're telling you, you know, Mom, I'm feeling so sad that my soccer season's canceled and I don't know when I'll play again, we don't want to respond to them by saying, oh, well, you know, so-and-so has it so much worse. We want to honor that loss for them and really feel it with them. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do that later. So this slide, I think, is probably the most important one if you take nothing away from tonight. I think this is a slide I kind of want to hand out to everybody I see and speak to, and I have handed it out to a lot of people, believe me. Because this, to me, if we're going to try to broad stroke it, this to me is the space that most of us are finding ourselves in. We are finding ourselves in this state where we are fluctuating between intense hyperarousal and then hypoarousal. So if you look at these 2 purple boxes, people are telling me that themselves, their children, their friends, their family members are really kind of rapidly cycling through these two states of being. And what are they? So hyperarousal is when you're hyped up, your body feels like it's on overdrive. It's like your engine got turned on, and you might feel anxious or angry, out of control, not in charge of your emotions, overwhelmed, like the quickest, the simplest thing, the smallest thing might set you off. And it's actually your body preparing itself after a trauma, or when it's been sort of threatened, it wants to run away. It wants to either fight or run away. And we're going to talk about fight or flight because that's a really important concept to understand. We have a whole little section on that. But for the purposes of right now, hyperarousal is just, again, this really heightened state where your blood pressure's up and your heart's racing, you might be sweating, and you feel like you have a ton of energy, but it's uncomfortable. It's not like a happy, energetic feeling. It almost is, I don't love to use the word manic, but a little bit of that intensity. And then you might find that you kind of cycle again really quickly down to hypoarousal, which is the exact opposite. It's this spacey, zoned out, sort of out of it, numb, frozen, shut down feeling where you can't really give much to others, and you even have a hard time giving to yourself. And what's happening as we're cycling through this is that we're seeing a shrinking window of tolerance. That's that blue box. And what's your window of tolerance? Well, your window of tolerance is your safe space. It's your place that you really want to live your life as much as you possibly can. Nobody's there all the time or even close to all the time. But this is our happy spot. This is our sweet spot. And this is where we feel like we can deal with what's happening in our life. We are best prepared to kind of take things on. We're empowered. Stress or pressure might come, but we feel like we can manage it. And I think we all kind of know when we're in that spot. And people are saying to me over and over again, you know what, I'm just not there. It's such a small window of tolerance for me. I can't find myself there because I'm cycling through this window, these hyperarousal and hypoarousal states. And sometimes I might be going through them multiple times a day, even multiple times an hour. Am I crazy? Am I losing my mind? That's a question I've heard over. Is my kid going crazy? What's happening? So you're not going crazy. You are actually experiencing something that is a collective response to trauma or grief or loss or threat. And it's your body's way of dealing with it. And it's super uncomfortable, and it's supposed to happen when you're dealing with an immediate threat. And we'll talk about that. That's how it was designed to serve you. But unfortunately, right now, we're chronically in that stage. We're chronically in that state, and it's really, really uncomfortable. And people are saying to me, I feel like I'm jumping out of my skin. I'm having a tremendous amount of discomfort, and I know my kids are feeling it too. So this kind of brings us to how does your brain, what is your brain and body doing? And we're going to talk a little brain science, but we're going to go really quickly through it. And I want to quickly take this time to remind you, if you have questions as I'm talking, because I know I'm going through a lot, please submit them on the Q&A, and we will do our very best to get to them at the end. So your brain and body response is designed to protect you in times of great stress or trauma. But in our current environment, it is negatively impacting our mental health and wellness because of the chronic nature of our response. And that's what this fight or flight is about. I won't dig in too deep here, but our bodies and brains are this amazing machine that work together. And from the dawn of mankind, it's been established between our brain and our glands to, again, work together to protect us from an imminent threat. So we have a little bear there. If a bear is chasing you in the woods, or any wild animal is chasing you in the woods, your brain has to react really quickly, and it has to go into fight or flight mode in order for you not to get attacked by the bear. You need to be able to kind of get your adrenaline pumping, your heart rate going. You might find some other things happening, shake, dry mouth, that kind of thing, but you have to prepare to fight or flight as a way to save your life. So in that way, sort of traditionally, we we get protection from this fight or flight. And I always sort of think of the stories that you hear of parents lifting cars up if their child has been, hit by a car. It's incredible things that your body can do in times of great trauma. But unfortunately, this wonderful mechanism that was designed to help us and protect us is actually creating an incredible amount of chronic discomfort for all of us. And again, it looks different for everybody, but I'm hearing a lot about, sleeping problems and eating problems, attention issues, tons of emotional distress. Again, this cycling of mood that is, really rapid and again, really uncomfortable. And this is sort of what we are doing in this chronic state of stress that is not good for us. And you guys will get these slides after, so you can dig in as deeply as you'd like on it. But really, these areas in our brain that are responsible for all these important things we do are getting a tremendous amount of input, and it's creating all kinds of functioning issues, from more anxiety to poor decision making to poor communication skills. And again, we're seeing it also in our kids. And one of the challenges is our kids don't, depending on their age, really understand what's happening. So they may feel just that incredible discomfort and not know how to talk about it or verbalize what it is. And we need to be able to guide them a little bit with that. So this is the big question. And like I said at the outset, I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. How do we help ourselves and our families? Well, there's a lot we can do. And I kind of harken back to the idea of, let's find some small, simple ways we can take some control back in a very out of control time. And I want to connect the things that we talk about in the next 15 or so minutes to trying to increase our window of tolerance. I think if we can do that, if we think about the fact that we're all cycling at various speeds, probably between hypo and hyperarousal states, if we can really focus on what do I need to do, and even if it's very simple things, simple is better a lot of times, especially now. What do I need to do for myself and my family to increase our window of tolerance, to make all of us feel a little more comfortable right now? So this is where I'm hoping to draw a little bit from the work that I've been doing for all these years around anxiety and loss and grief and trauma, because we have some methods that we know work really well. One method that isn't working so well, I want to point out, because I think it might be familiar to a lot of you, particularly if you've struggled with anxiety before or your kids have. You've probably been told to go and work with a therapist who does cognitive behavioral therapy. We call it CBT. And I do a lot of this work with anxious kids, and it's so well received, and it's really helpful with anxiety. And the big fancy name of cognitive behavioral therapy really just means, instead of examining a behavior, so if a parent comes in and says, oh, my kid doesn't want to go to school, they can't get on the school bus, we go back and we look at how they're thinking about things and how then they're feeling, and then why it's leading to a behavior. Well, oftentimes for anxious kids and anxious people, they have faulty thinking. They're making some thinking mistakes, and they're not thinking about things well. And we go back and we question their thoughts. So we challenge their irrational thoughts. We sort of put their thoughts on trial by taking down some evidence of times that they did things that weren't the way they think about it. Like if a child says, I can't go to school because I don't have any friends. I never have, I don't have any friends at school. And then we kind of go back and we say, well, tell me about some of the kids you know at your school. Well, there's a friend. We point out their faulty thinking, and we put it on trial, or we collect evidence. And then we also do this Socratic questioning the thoughts that contribute to your anxiety. So if you look at these questions, you can probably see right off the bat that they're not going to work so well right now. Because if we ask questions, what's most likely to happen, or how likely is it that my fear is going to come true? If my fear comes true, will it be in a matter of a week, a month, a year? Well, we don't know. Here we are in this I don't know situation, unlike we've ever been in before. So this isn't working well. And I caution many of you, if you have experience with CBT and your kids have been using it or you've been using it, this isn't the time where it's going to work as well. We've got to come up with some other ways to help ourselves and help our kids. So this is an outline of a dialectical behavior therapy trick. And I want to also say CBT and DBT are very broad and very elaborate programs. And I'm just pulling a couple pieces to help you. This is by no means, you know, sort of a full course in CBT or DBT. I don't think anyone would be up for that right now. But I like this acronym because I think it works pretty well in this time. There's a couple places, a couple of them that don't work as well, and I put little asterisks next to it. But activities sounds really simple, but the truth of the matter is that if you're engaged in something thought-provoking that requires a lot of concentration, it's very hard to feel anxious when you're doing that because you're distracted from your anxiety. So, you know, I know a lot of people are doing puzzles like crazy or, you know, digging into their knitting. Those things are really wonderful because they distract your brain, and sometimes they can distract your brain for a really long period of time. So those are huge, huge for your kids too. Contributing, focusing on something or someone other than yourself is so powerful. It's powerful always, but it's really powerful now when so many people need support and need help. So I highly, you know, encourage people to try to get involved and get their kids involved. Writing letters, doing things remotely can be really powerful. Comparisons. So here I asterisked this one. Look at your situation in comparison to something worse. So I had said earlier in the presentation, let's be careful not to minimize losses and not to say to our kid who's mourning the loss of their, you know, sports season, oh, well, so-and-so has it worse. And that still holds true. But you can make some comparisons in terms of other hard things maybe you've gone through. You know, like you could say to your child, you know, Mike, we've been through X, Y, and Z together, and we came through it. Or we're lucky we've got this. We're lucky we have this time as a family. Whatever it may be, can be a really important thing to do. Emotions, doing something that will create a competing emotion. Sounds really simple, but if you feel like you want to cry, make yourself laugh. Watch a funny movie. Pushing away is doing away with negative thoughts by pushing them out of your mind. A little tricky right now. One thing I love to do with young kids is have them write down the worries that they're having and then scrunch up the paper, throw them out. Throw them in the fireplace. Do something to kind of help push thoughts away. When your emotions take over, try to focus more on thoughts. That should be asterisk too, because that's a little tricky. Sensations is one that's really helpful right now because you can find some safe physical sensations to distract you from intense negative emotions. And that can be anything that involves your 5 senses. So, you know, taking a bath with aromatherapy, candles, listening to music, anything that sort of tunes into your senses, because through our senses we take in input very rapidly and quickly, and it's a great way to turn a mood around. I know that I am getting a little short on time, so I'm not going to really go through this in detail, because these are some pretty basic self-care kind of things. They're really, really important right now. I won't really, you know, again, go through them all in detail. I think one that I want to pull out a little bit that's so important is the setting of boundaries. We are all together all the time right now, and we don't know, you know, how long that's going to be. So really, really being mindful of the boundaries you need to have between you and your loved ones. And that could be something as simple as, you know, the dinner table. I think a lot of us are feeling, well, now we're home all the time together. We must have dinner together every night. Not necessarily. We may want to talk to our kids, particularly our kids coming home from college who really weren't supposed to be at the dinner table. Maybe they want to eat dinner in their room once in a while. Maybe it wouldn't have been something they would have done years ago, but we've got to be really mindful that everybody's boundaries are different and we need a reset on them. So just kind of being really aware of doing some of these is really, really important. I'm just going to bring you to the next few slides that were put together from my dear friend, Julie, who is the founder of this wonderful wellness company called Namaste Wellness. And we've actually partnered with them over the past several months, and we will continue to try to bring these pillars of wellness to our families, because we all need some help with them. And I don't know if Jeff Wald is on this call, but Jeff Wald, who's a Cornell graduate, and so undergrad and grad school, he's a board member of Namaste Wellness. So I just wanted to kind of call him out. But they've put together some really wonderful information around how to incorporate some simple wellness into your day-to-day lives. And what kind of jumps out to me, and there are these 4 pillars of wellness that are really, really sort of vital to well-being, and even more vital right now. As my friend Julie said to me the other day, she said, I think everyone in the world is going to have to learn to do some sort of meditation. And meditation doesn't mean sitting there in a classic meditation pose, but it means, sorry, these are popping up, means finding a place to incorporate these pillars. So I think, again, for me, it resonates when I look at these 4 pillars. I think I know which ones I do well. I think I'm pretty good with movement and connection. But I know number 2, I'm lacking. I lack the ability to be still. So I encourage you to look at these 4 pillars and think about them in the context of your family and you as an individual and your kids, and really focus on the ones that you're feeling that you're not doing that well with, that you don't have any really good or not enough good sort of strategy to manage, and see if you can find a place for movement, stillness, connection, or nourishment. We don't have to do all of them. We don't have to do them all the time, but try to sort of find a space to gain some skills within, 1 or 2 of these pillars. These 4 cards are digging a little deeper into those pillars, and I definitely encourage you, after the fact, you'll get this presentation. Please look at some of these and come up with your own ways to incorporate these 4 pillars into your world. There's a lot of great ideas, and I'm sure you can come up with some great ways to do it as well. So again, if we go back to the 4, there's movement, stillness, connection, and nourishment. And really notice, again, where you feel that yourself or your child or your family as a whole may not be paying attention enough. Are you connecting? Are you nourishing yourselves? And this is a great time, because we have been given the gift of time, to say, hey, I want to spend a little time and energy working on this. And I think, again, this sort of harkens back to the Viktor Frankl quote, which is that if we can find some space in this unknowingness, and if we can find some time in this really challenging time of loss to gain some skills, and particularly to help our kids gain some skills, then that will be really wonderful. Then it's not all about loss. It's about gain as well. And finally, just being very mindful of time, I put this up here. This is a emotion sensation wheel, and I use this kind of thing quite a bit in counseling sessions. There are tons of them out there. This is just one that we like. But what it does is it starts to give you a language to talk about emotions and sensations. And believe it or not, most of us, and our kids as well, of course, don't have a great language for this. There's probably a lot of words you see on here that you never use, you never think about. And this can be a really powerful thing to sort of print out and put on your refrigerator and use as a way to talk about what's going on. Because while we can understand the hypo and hyper arousal states, our kids don't really understand it if they're of a certain age. They may be able to say, I'm feeling jumpy, I'm trembling, my heart is racing, or I'm feeling calm, I'm feeling satisfied, I'm feeling despair. Some of these really powerful words. And that's the way they need to speak about their experience. And I think it's really wonderful to I know it's really wonderful to try to engage them on this level and to increase their language. It's like learning a new language, the language of emotion. And I certainly believe we don't focus on it enough. And this is a really great time to do it since we're having so many changing emotions at all times. This is a sort of tried and true, very simple chart for young kids, 10 and under. If any of you have kids that age, I think this is really useful. And this is a really good way to talk about mood without saying, I'm in a bad mood, I'm in a good mood, I'm feeling depressed or anxious. It uses language and it uses colors. And so if you're finding that your kid is really down a lot, talk to him about being in the blue zone. What does he need when he's in that zone? What do you need when you're in that zone? How do you kind of respect each other's space when you're in that zone? It's just a really kind of simple, common language. And again, I think one of the things that's important is keeping things simple right now, because we're so overwhelmed with a flood of emotions that if we can simplify and do just a few things, we're going to put less pressure on ourselves and we're going to get better results. And just going to kind of start to end with this quote that is also from a client of mine. And she went into a little more detail about it, but she said, we are all weathering the storm together, but we are on our own boats. And I think that's just really important. Again, we are having this very universal collective experience that we've never had before. Nobody, there has never been a time where the whole world is going through something together. So there is this collective experience, but we have to be really aware of our own boat and what's going on in our boat. Do we have life vests? And life vests, can be anything from the tools that I hopefully gave to you tonight to, good support system, family, friends. Some of us have more support than others. Do we need a safety raft? Do we need to bring in some help? I like the analogy of the boat because, we're kind of going along on these waves, and things come in waves. Emotions come in waves, experiences come in waves. But just again, paying really close attention to what we need at any given moment, and also understanding that this fluctuation in these moods, you're not going crazy. Whatever, the word crazy is a little bit of a strange word, but you're actually responding the way your body was designed to respond to trauma or stress or loss. But unfortunately, it's hitting you over and over again. And so some of these tools that I've provided tonight hopefully will be able to help you navigate it a little bit easier. And then my final quote, I'm big on the quotes, is this kind of tongue-in-cheek quote, but it's so funny to me because it just sort of sums it up. I have definitely been cleaning my house with Q-tips. So home isolation has its ups and downs. One day you're flying high and cleaning the baseboards with a Q-tip, and the next day you're drinking tequila and watching squirrels out the window. It's hard to find the in-between. The power is in the search. So I hope today I gave you just, even if you took one little tool from here to try to increase your window of tolerance, try to limit discomfort. Know that going through that hyper and hypoarousal, it's just going to happen. But if you can sort of be mindful of trying to find that middle window of tolerance and do whatever little things you need to do within the 4 pillars of movement, stillness, connection, nourishment, whatever works for you to get into that sweet spot, then that's a goal. That's a great goal. So hopefully this talk helped you, lead you in that direction. I gave you just a couple resources that I really like. Child Mind Institute is doing an incredible job they're always incredible. I think they're an amazing organization, but they're hosting live webinars twice a day, every day at 10:30 and 4:30, where you can write in, ask questions, get your questions answered with their therapist. Amazing. They've got great content on there. My website has a ton of resources if you need any support or if you want to speak with somebody. We've got a lot of counselors ready to go. Namaste Wellness, more tips on healthy living and wellness. And then the book Anna the Germ just came out. It's, I think, the first book written about how to talk to young kids about COVID. And it's a great book if you haven't seen it. I think it just came out about 2 days ago. But please feel free at any time to email me, reach out to me through my website, kidsboost.com, if you need anything further. I think I need to stop and see if we got any questions. Turn it back over to Karen, or turn it over to Karen.
Thank you, Susan. This is tremendous. We have a few questions. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. We've got a few questions here. I'm going to paraphrase the first question.
Okay.
The first person commented that this pause in time has given us much needed time out. We're returning to an old-fashioned lifestyle and they're enjoying having dinner at home and no commute. But they were hoping you could comment, they fear the return back rather than they fear the time right now.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like this family is finding a lot of stillness, which is something that a lot of people are trying to find. It's just kind of slowing things down and not running at all times. Yeah, I think that anticipatory grief or anticipatory loss that I spoke about before is one of our biggest challenges, because we don't know when, we don't know how, we don't know where. And I think what I really, or what I would say about that is, I think we have to be really presently focused. I think it's a bit of a wheel spin right now to think too far in advance, because we don't really have anything to count on or to plan with. As far as I know, most things that are happening in the summer or the fall are still up in the air. So to even kind of prepare ourselves or think too much about them, there doesn't seem to be a lot of benefit. I think it should really be about, listen, we are dealing with things as they come. Whatever will come, we will deal with as a family. We are together now. We are communicating together. We've probably communicated more than we ever have in the past. So we'll continue to do that, and we'll sit down at the dinner table and we'll talk about what it means if we're going back to school, or if whatever the next thing is. Because that person is right. That's a huge part of this collective trauma, is how are we going to reemerge, and how are we going to go back, and what are we going to go back to? So I really caution to be too forward thinking, to just kind of be in the moment, but say, look, we're building our skills now. We're building our resilience. That we can do now. So whatever comes our way, whatever answers we get about school or about sports, about celebrations, about our future, we're going to be able, we have some ways to talk about it now, and we can help each other through it. Hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. Well, we've got some more questions. We've got some that are some positive feedback. One person said, this is amazing. Is it possible to share the recording with others? And then the other person said, can you send out the slide deck for tonight's presentation? And I will answer this question and say, yes, a post-event survey will be sent tomorrow. And if you fill that out, at the end of that survey, it will take you to the resources page where you'll have access for this information. So let's see, we've got another question here. During this time, how much space is okay to give our kids, thinking middle school and high school age? What if they never want to eat dinner together? Is that okay? Or would you encourage us to have more regular times of connection?
Such a good question. I have a middle schooler and a high schooler. I'm struggling with that as well, that middle ground. So I think that the best answer to that is, again, a communication about it and a collaborative approach to what boundaries do you need, when and how do you need your space, where is it, and what times of the day are important for your space, and which ones aren't, and sort of let everybody have a say in what it looks like. I don't think being incredibly, this is not a time for rigidity, but it's not a time for no boundaries at all. So I think that the best way to establish ones that work for your family is to talk to your family members about it and let them all weigh in. And however they want to, I mean, however it works best for you. You know, maybe your kids write notes and then you sit down and you share your notes. Maybe you have a family conversation. Maybe you put together a diagram or a spreadsheet and people can fill it out. I mean, I don't, you know, it depends what works for your family. But I think it's finding that sweet spot. And again, I'm sort of pulling it back to that window of tolerance. We're all having a hard time finding our window of tolerance. So whatever we can do to find it, and we're trying to find it with multiple people, can be really tricky. But I think we have to be developing a language to talk about, what do you need? One thing I am hearing over and over again is that, you know, when this first started, we were all kind of, as families, saying to ourselves, all right, well, we're going to get back all that family time, and we're, you know, we're not running the sports, and we're not going to music class, and we're not going to school. So we're just going to have tons of family time. And maybe for the first few weeks, that was great. And then I think some of the novelty wore off, and it was like, you know what? We want to maybe go back a little bit to some of our patterns before, where, you know, maybe the kids ate at different times or the parents ate at different times. We weren't all home together. Some families have almost tried to mimic some of those patterns so that things don't feel so jarringly different. I don't think there's an always and a never, like those words just shouldn't come out of our mouths right now. And I think we have to be respectful of each other, but you know, again, I give up the example of like letting college kids eat a couple meals in their room. You know, I know a few families have offered that to their college kids, and actually a lot of times the college kids are just happy to have that option, but they come and eat dinner with the family anyway. So I do, and again, particularly for kids who are home, who aren't usually home, I think it's really, really important to say to them, like, I know you're not even really supposed to be here. What would you be doing on a Wednesday night? What would you be eating with friends? Do you want to have a Zoom call with your friends and eat dinner with them? You know, trying to, in this very abnormal time, recreate some normalcy in your routines, I think is really important.
Super. Okay, we've got, what's a good strategy for one family member who blows up or is spiraling out of control?
Yeah, that's hard. So it depends on their age, and it depends on how they were functioning prior to this. And I say that because if they were struggling before this, then the fact that they're struggling while this is going on is not really surprising, because again, people who were having those kind of challenges before are at higher risk. So I really feel like you've got to do almost your own risk assessment. And I don't know what their spiraling looks like. Does it look like anger? Does it look like anxiety? Are they old enough to talk about what it is? And if you feel like it is out of control and you don't have tools, and it feels completely out of your control, or you know, sort of beyond your ability to deal, I think it is a really, really good time to get professional help. Again, I said it before, you know, the virtual space for counseling is pretty incredible because it translates pretty well for older kids and adults. I know I've been doing all of my sessions first, you know, via Zoom or Doxy, and they're great because a lot of kids who would normally not respond very well to counseling are enjoying it because they're in their homes, they're, you know, they might be in bed, it feels like much more low pressure. So I feel like if you think your child's having a tremendously adverse reaction and it's not within the scope of something that you've seen from them before, seek out some help, even just for, you know, assessment purposes, because you don't want to ignore some signs. And again, if there was something pre-existing going on, an anxiety or depression or a learning issue or something of that nature, it just is exacerbated. So I would, again, depends very much on the age of the child, but if you're worried and you're concerned, reach out to somebody and get their thoughts, a mental health professional, and sort of see how they would guide you.
Fantastic. I think we have time for 1 to 2 more quick questions. I'm going to combine two questions into one. So this will be your last question. Could you comment about adult children? This question came in by email. Can you comment about adult children returning from home, as well as adult children that may be healthcare workers, and the type of support for both, and how to deal with all of those types of situations? Thank you.
Okay, so adult children coming back to live at home. Yeah, and healthcare workers. So the adult children coming back to live at home is very complicated and has a lot of loss attached to it, because you've got a sort of situation where there was a degree of independence that now is not there anymore. And then for parents who were sort of in their empty nest headspace, now they've got to reassess their roles and relationships. I think with that one, like I said, the communication is so key to really, and these are older kids, adult kids, so you can conceivably talk in a pretty sophisticated way and communicate about boundaries. Boundaries to me are really important because we're not getting the physical boundaries we need. I mean, we are from other people, but not from the people in our home. So we have to have like emotional boundaries, and we have to be able to say, I need X, Y, and Z, and I need X, Y, and Z. And I think we have to be incredibly clear and concise in our expectations. And again, one of the things I'm saying to a lot of my clients is, it's a great skill to learn, because you always are going to have to negotiate and renegotiate boundaries with relationships. So it's a gift to learn these skills now. I think, again, having a very open and honest conversation is the first way to start, and knowing that you're going to have to compromise and you're going to have to be flexible. You cannot be rigid, and you want to allow that adult child to mimic their life pre-COVID as much as possible. So again, and I keep kind of coming back to meals, but I'm hearing a lot of drama around meal times at homes. They don't need to be present with you just because you're all in the house all the time, just because they're physically there. If you have space to spread out, you've got to be able to create that independence for them, because they're independent. Prior to this, they were independent. And so we can't we really don't want to pull that away from them. But it's complicated. There's a tremendous number of families in that situation. And it's got a lot of elements to it. To speak quickly about healthcare workers, they need to find these pillars of wellness wherever they can. I spoke actually to a nurse the other day who said that every day when she's going to work, she has a certain friend that she calls, who's also a healthcare worker, and they just play music in their car ride, and they speak to each other every day, and they've developed that connection. If you're looking at the pillars, that's a real connection pillar for her. And she's like, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have it. And it's, I think, 5 or 10 minutes. It's very quick, but it's a new routine. And I think finding new routines that sort of normalize things and work are really important. Our routines are not going to look like what they used to. So this kind of comes back to that question about, should we have a schedule or should we be really fluid? I think if you can find some very flexible and fluid routines that work with the current state you're in, that's going to be kind of life-saving. And within these 4 pillars of movement, stillness, connection, and nourishment, it will be even more valuable.
Susan, thank you so much for this really, really wonderful presentation. Your thoughtful insight about mental health and wellness for all of us and for our families during this challenging time was so valuable to me, and I'm sure to everyone who was logged in. I'm really not sure how good I'm going to be at finding that sweet spot that you talked about, but it gave me a lot to think about, and I'm sure everyone really feels the same way. We so appreciate the time and effort that you put into sharing this information with the great group of Cornellians and friends who are gathered here tonight. And so to everyone in attendance, on behalf of the Cornell Northeast Corridor Office of Alumni Affairs and Development, we want to thank you for spending your time with us this evening. And as Karen mentioned during the Q&A, Tomorrow, you're going to receive an email that has a link to a post-event survey. And when you answer the survey, it's a little bribery. When you answer the survey, your comments will not only help us shape future programs like this one, but when you complete it, you will then be directed to a webpage that will contain Susan's slides from tonight, as well as other Cornell resources. And again, as Karen mentioned, this will become available. A few people asked about if they would be able to share this, or if this would be, there would be a recording available later, which it will, along with many other things. If you haven't looked at it yet, there's a website. The website is live.alumni.cornell.edu. And there's a lot of really great content, from silly, fun Cornell history to more serious academic things about COVID and other things going on at the university that you can check out. So be well, stay healthy. Best wishes to all of you and to your loved ones. And we really hope to see you again soon. Good night, everybody.